Nate, tell me, what is your reaction to Shedeur falling to the fifth round?
What I find interesting is that when everything came out after he got drafted or leading up to him getting drafted by the Browns in the fifth round, I kind of understood why he became a fifth round pick. Because normally, if you take a look at the teams that needed quarterbacks, there was one team that needed a starting quarterback, and that was Tennessee. The Giants, they paid Jameis Winston, they paid Russell Wilson. So they didn't really need a starting quarterback necessarily. The Saints already have Derek Carr. The Steelers are going to go get Aaron Rodgers. You think the Jets, they paid Justin Fields $20 million per year. They were not looking at a quarterback. So all the teams that desperately needed a quarterback, there was only one, Tennessee, because Will Levis can't stop throwing pick sixes. So they were looking for backup quarterbacks. And you're not exactly, unless you're the Giants and have this opportunity because you have quarterbacks on one-year deals and you don't exactly trust Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston, and you have the opportunity to go get a quarterback because your head coach and GM may get fired either mid-season or by the end of the season. You're not going to be really in love with any of these quarterbacks in the first round. And especially when you take a look at the intangible side of things, a lot of GMs, scouts, head coaches loved the intangibles of Jackson Dart or Shuck or any one of these other guys, Milrow. They like the intangibles more than Shedeur Sanders. And what I also find interesting is that when you take a look at the off-the-field situation with some other former Browns quarterbacks like Johnny Manziel and also Baker Mayfield. It's like, well, what about them? They had some character issues, but they still got drafted in the first round. Hell, Baker Mayfield, he was drafted first overall. Well, I would not say that's a very fair comparison because there's a little bit of a difference between those two quarterbacks and Shedeur Sanders. Yes, well, Shedeur Sanders doesn't have himself any issues off the field or incidents off the field. He's sort of in proximity with somebody who did have massive off-the-field implications too, where Shedeur ultimately ended up in the fifth round. But Manziel and Mayfield both had good to great mobility. Shedeur Sanders doesn't have great mobility. He has limited mobility. Mayfield was a fiery leader. He was very loud and proud, and he brought that to Oklahoma, and he performed very well. Meanwhile, Manziel, he was cocky, but we see in some very important games, he comes out and he shines. So, and also, we've seen some clips of post-game conferences, Shedeur Sanders criticizing offensive line, lack of running game. You don't want to see that from a big leader. Normally in the NFL, when your offensive line sucks or your running game's not great, most top-tier quarterbacks still put some of the blame on themselves. We didn't really hear that from Shedeur. It was, how many pressures did I get? How many sacks did I get? Oh, okay. That's not exactly what a leader does. So I think it's a little bit of a different situation. And also, Mayfield didn't have a cannon of an arm. Johnny Manziel had mobility. He could roll out and throw deep bombs, but they still had pretty good arms. What does scouts criticize Shedeur for? Well, his deep ball is not great. It kind of drops off after 40 yards. His intermediate throws could be much better. You don't really want to hear that from a first-round pick. And let's talk about the off-the-field issues, right? Because that's one thing that Mayfield and both Johnny Manziel, they got ripped on. Mayfield had a public intoxication incident, but scouts overlooked that because of his success at a top-tier program and also his hyper-competitive nature, and also he had a better skill set if we want to compare the two. Johnny Manziel, he loved the nightlife, the partying, he had a drinking issue, but then going up against Nick Saban's defense at the time, which was considered the closest thing to an NFL defense in college, 77% completion percentage, 345 total yards, and 2 touchdowns. Scouts overlooked the off-the-field issues because his performances in big-time games, especially against Nick Saban at the time, the best college coach. You could probably argue probably the best college coach in college football history, at least modern college football history. What about Shedeur Sanders? And I want to preface what I sort of alluded to earlier. Yes, while he didn't have an incident like public intoxication or the nightlife or the party life and a drinking issue, his dad didn't exactly help him with, we've seen in the interviews previously. He was asked, and what about Cleveland? We're preying on the Giants right now. Shedeur Sanders, and I'm not going to completely just discount Shedeur Sanders, what he had to do, because reportedly he bombed interviews. And one of the teams that was first very interested in you, Brian Daboll and the New York Giants, reportedly you went into that interview after giving an assignment for an install, didn't do your homework, Brian Daboll called you out on it, and you didn't like being called out on it. That's not a great look. You can't go in, and Jonathan Jones of CBS said that you essentially sabotaged interviews for teams that you didn't want to go to. Newsflash, they choose you, you don't choose them. Humble yourself. Go into the interview and act like anybody else. Prove yourself to them. Don't come in there entitled saying, well, you know what? I'm better than all this. I'm going to go to this place. I could fall to 21 in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now have DK Metcalf, George Pickens, a great head coach, a phenomenal defense. I'm going to be okay. Well, now you're stuck with the Cleveland Browns. You're currently the 5th quarterback on the roster. Not exactly the best look. It really isn't. So you sabotage your interviews because you're deciding, well, I'm going to probably end up with Pittsburgh. They like me. There's all the reports about that. I'm going to be set. It's going to be okay. And when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, they didn't exactly want you. And that's strictly told. You were the last pick for them. And I think it was Jimmy Haslam, the owner, coming in and saying, we got 1 pick left in the draft. Let's just go out and get Shedeur. We already drafted Dylan Gabriel. Why not get Shedeur? We're in the 5th round. It's okay. And you can tell by the reactions of Kevin Stefanski and also Andrew Berry, the GM, this is the reaction. Weren't exactly thrilled. Not a soul is smiling besides Jimmy Haslam. So that tells you one thing. Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry, this was not their decision. It was strictly Jimmy Haslam coming in and saying, we're drafting Shedeur Sanders. So I'm sorry, and I'll add on top of the fact. Let me give some positive spin on this. With all that being said in my mind, doesn't matter where you get drafted. Being a Patriots fan my whole life, Tom Brady was picked 199. Kurt Warner, Hall of Famer, undrafted. Tony Romo, a phenomenal player, undrafted. And Brock Purdy, last pick in the draft. Everybody praised him for being a top 10 quarterback. In my mind, and because I've lived through it, I've seen it, I've experienced it, you don't need to be a high pick to succeed. What really matters is when you get behind that offensive line, make the most of it. You're going to be under the brightest of lights, tens of thousands of fans chanting you or booing you, depending on where you are. Make the most of your opportunity. I'm going to root for Shedeur Sanders, but his missteps cannot be, completely just pushed to the side. He has a lot of talent, but going into draft day, having your own brand, legendary everywhere, bombing interviews reportedly, sabotaging interviews, your dad basically excluding you from joining or being drafted by any other team, or at least the threat was there, and you not being a consensus first overall pick like Eli Manning, which everybody's going to talk about, and also John Elway, who might have been the greatest college quarterback prospect at the time. There's a little bit of a difference there. Cam Ward was a unanimous number 1 overall pick. There was no question about it. You had to prove to the other teams why you were worth their time. And in my opinion, you just did it. You bombed the interviews. You don't have the off-the-field issues, but all the intangibles. People love Jalen Milrow's athleticism. People loved Tyler Shuck's arm. They loved Cam Ward. Cam Ward is a unanimous number 1 pick, so I shouldn't even mention him. That's a little bit unfair. Jackson Dart. Brian Daboll loved Jackson Dart. So all these quarterbacks have better intangibles than you. We can look at the stats and say, well, you did this, that, and the other thing. But stats don't tell the full story. That's at least what I've been told by everybody out there. And I can understand that. And this is a perfect example of it. The intangibles and the off-the-field stuff matter more to the GMs than you completing 71% of your throws for your college career. So that's my take on the Shedeur Sanders situation.
Well, that's an interesting take, and you bring up some excellent points. I guess I have a little bit different twist on it. He was taken 144 by the Browns. Now have 5 quarterbacks. Watson was probably doesn't have a chance of playing next year because he re-injured his Achilles. Flacco, 40 years old. Pickett, poor second. Gabriel, I'm shocked that he was drafted ahead of Sanders. And he's number 5 on the depth chart, it looks like, for the time being. In 2 seasons at Colorado, he threw for 7,364 yards. Had 64 touchdowns, a 71.8% completion percentage. He improved on that's the average for the 2 years. In his senior year, he improved on it. He threw for more than 4,000 yards, 37 TDs, 10 interceptions, a 74% completion percentage. The guy's got some great numbers here. According to the Stefanski, Sanders will have a chance to compete for the starting job throughout the offseason. All the quarterbacks are going to have a chance. It's going to be tough to get them all enough time to really decide who plays the best, I think, with all of those quarterbacks there, but we'll have to see. For now, he's focused on getting acclimated to his new home in Cleveland with the rookie minicamp starting on May 9th, May 9th through 11th. So we'll be watching that closely. His tumble in the draft was a key story throughout the Thursday through Sunday. He was projected by many as number 2 quarterback in the draft behind Cam Ward, being drafted 144 and 50 spots behind Dylan Gabriel. The Browns' other quarterback, to me, was a surprise. The take, and I can't not mention this because I think there is a thread of truth to it. Stephen A. Smith's comments, this is a bad look for the NFL. It feels like a Colin Kaepernick level collusion. Owners look like they are colluding, messing up everything. What has been done to Sanders will outshine everything else in the draft. And I think to an extent that did they talked about Sanders all the time throughout the draft. We watched a lot of it. We'll never believe that this is about just talent evaluation again. This is a disgrace. You all think that this doesn't have anything to do with teams hating on Deion Sanders? In a different way, this is a Kaepernick all over again. And Kaepernick, and interestingly enough, Kaepernick sued the NFL owners over collusion, and the case was settled in 2019, so he did win a settlement. He reportedly sandbagged interviews with teams who had proven starting quarterbacks that he knew he didn't really want to go to, which I agree is a bad look. But it'll be interesting to see. I think he should get a good look. I think he should get a fair look, and I think I have a deep down feeling that he's going to perform well.
Well, here's the difference. I completely disagree with Stephen A. Smith about the Colin Kaepernick got blackballed out of the NFL because he was kneeling for the national anthem. Mm-hmm. Shedeur Sanders just has a bad personality, came into interviews, and made GMs and head coaches not like him. That's completely different. When you just go into an interview saying, you got a starting quarterback. I don't know why I'm here. When Brian Daboll has a last-second meeting with you, and he gives you an install, and you don't do your homework, and then have an issue with the head coach calling you out on not doing your job, that's a bad personality trait.
Yeah,
that means you're entitled.
I agree with that, but I'm not sure I put so much stock in Brian Daboll. I look at how he's handled quarterbacks. He gave Daniel Jones. He was a big advocate for Daniel Jones getting the big contract, and Daniel Jones was a bust after that. And his
big advocate, he was stuck with him.
And
Brian Daboll had nothing to do with signing him to that contract.
His record in the last 2 years has been terrible. He's fighting. He's fighting for his job
because he had no quarterback.
Yeah, well, he had no quarterback when he gave Daniel Jones a $160 million contract.
That's the GM.
No, but he was a big advocate for this. And
I don't think
Jackson Dart draft was more about Daboll than anybody in the
correct, because he sees the same thing that he did in Josh Allen. And look at the difference between pre-Brian Daboll for Josh Allen and post-Brian Daboll. He went from having the most red zone interceptions to having one of the fewest red zone interceptions. Brian Daboll knows quarterbacks. What he can't do is take a bad quarterback and try to make him much better than he potentially can on a roster that's not built to win. Because the Giants are still feeling the effects of David Gettleman, their previous GM. And Joe Shane made a very bad misstep. And of course, it's the same thing. I'm shocked you're taking it from that standpoint. Because you ripped Jimmy Haslam for calling out a bad quarterback situation. But now you're calling out Brian Daboll for having a positive outlook on a bad quarterback. I'm shocked because Jimmy Haslam ripped Deshaun Watson, which is rightfully so.
Well, I preface my comment there as I thought it was the wrong thing to do when he was still owed him almost $100 million. I thought he would be trying
Daniel
to
Jones
get
is still
some value for his
right.
Money.
But Daniel Jones signed a $160 million contract with $82 million guaranteed. So it's essentially the same thing.
They were able to get off him after year 2 though, without much damage.
But again,
that was how this contract was structured.
But Brian Daboll is not being high on Daniel Jones now. He was when they first signed him to a contract, if that's what you're saying. I really have not heard Brian Daboll come out glowingly, completely out of his mind, saying Daniel Jones is the best quarterback in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think that's completely... And also people saying the Johnny Unitas Award. Let me read you some of the Johnny Unitas Award winners. Mac Jones, Max Duggan, Gardner Minshew, Mason Rudolph, Connor Cook, A.J. McCarron, Colin Klein, Scott Tolzien. I can keep going. The Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award means something for the good quarterbacks like Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels. But it doesn't necessarily mean you're a good quarterback. In fact, the Gardner Minshew pick, Gardner Minshew put up you talk about the stats. Let's talk about the stats for 2 seconds. Because Gardner Minshew put up very similar numbers. I'm going to read it to you as soon as I can get it up. Because albeit, here we go. In 2019, Gardner Minshew threw for 4,700 yards, 38 touchdowns, 9 picks, over 70% completion percentage. What round did he go in? The 6th. Sam Howell, before the draft, was a first-round prospect. Mm-hmm. He plummeted in the draft. It's how you present yourself. That's all it is. It's an interview. Why would I go into any job and just bomb an interview just because I think that I'm above whatever position I'm currently at?
No, I think it's more than just an interview. I think
of course it's just, the NFL has spoken. The NFL has spoken. It clearly was mostly about the interview because then you wouldn't have coaches.
Well, I think that's a mistake.
You wouldn't have assistant coaches coming out and saying this was the worst interview. At the end
of the day, it's how you perform on the field.
No, it clearly isn't.
You look at the end of the day, Nate. You go out there and you win games for your team as quarterback. You don't make mistakes. You put up good numbers. You make the players around you better. It doesn't matter whether you filled out a questionnaire properly for a coach or you didn't do so well in an interview. It's how you perform on the field that matters. You look at the Sanders family. They have a father who was one of the best players in the NFL. He coached his son for 4 years. His son had excellent numbers. They're outstanding numbers. They're NFL-ready numbers that he put up. He has a swagger, and now he's going to play with a chip on his shoulder because he's going to say, "I'm going to prove you guys wrong." And I think that there's a lot to be said for that. A lot to be said for it.
So if it really is about how you're on the field, Quinn Ewers was a perfect 1,000 recruit and played under Steve Sarkisian and made 2 college football playoffs. He went past Shedeur Sanders. Will Howard just won the national championship, had 73% completion percentage and 4,000 yards. Mm-hmm. Went after Shedeur Sanders. Colin McCord went after Shedeur Sanders, threw for 4,700 yards. Dylan Gabriel in college, 18,000 yards. Got drafted before Shedeur Sanders, but you don't think, and a lot of people thought, he's not above Shedeur Sanders level. So clearly, it's not about what you do on the field strictly.
No,
in that case,
I'm not saying it's totally, but I think that's what
you just said.
That's a defining factor, though. You look at Tom Brady.
Why did most
drafted 199, right? It's what he did on the field.
No, but
once he got into the game and he started playing and he won those games,
but you don't get drafted after you start an NFL game.
He didn't make the mistakes and he used his mental ability, which was above and beyond many others for sure. He never was taken out of the game. He was there for his career.
You're talking about his NFL
and he was drafted 199.
You're talking about his performance on an NFL field.
He played well in college too.
Then why was he a 6th round pick? Because of the other stuff. Yes, he performed well in college and was accurate. His intangibles.
No, but the reason why, Nate, I'll give you the reason why. Sure. Number one, his coach was a disaster. He had him rotating in and out. That was to me that was a huge mistake. That hurt him.
We thought of
that
it
hurt him.
At the time.
And his physical attributes, his stats physically. A lot of the teams felt like he didn't have the physique or the frame to be an NFL quarterback. That turned out to be totally not true. Okay. Totally not true.
Yeah, it turned out to be not true, but you look at it at the time because you're talking about Tom Brady post-draft.
I mean, you could say that Shedeur Sanders is a carbon copy of Tom Brady in a lot of ways.
No, we're not saying
in a lot of ways. Look at all the quarterbacks that went ahead of him. We'll see how it turns out.
Again,
all the quarterbacks that went ahead of Tom Brady. I think there were 6 quarterbacks that went ahead of him. They're all out of the NFL within 2 years, I think. And the ones that stuck around performed very poorly. He wound up being the best player to ever play in the NFL.
We're not talking.
So we'll see what happens.
Shedeur Sanders and Tom Brady should not be spoken in the same breath because they are nowhere near the same.
I'm talking about the fact that a lot of quarterbacks went ahead of them.
Okay, we could say that about Brock Purdy. We could say that about
That's true.
Dak
and look
Prescott.
at Brock Purdy.
He was a 4th round pick. We could say that about a lot of quarterbacks in the league. All of a sudden, that doesn't mean, they're Tom Brady 2.0. No, not at all. There's a reason why 6 quarterbacks went pre-Tom Brady. And if you talk about those other attributes, Milroe's a better athlete. So if we talk about the other quarterbacks who have better attributes than Shedeur Sanders, then we shouldn't be surprised if Jackson Dart goes before him, then Jalen Milroe goes before him. And how about this? Will Howard has a better arm. Why didn't he go before Shedeur then, if we're talking about strictly the physique and the performance on the field? No. Teams are put off by the fact that you bombed interviews, you have an entitled personality. There's a reason why an assistant coach said it was the worst interview he's ever been in his life. And clearly, people ripped on this anonymous assistant coach. It is a clear thing. The draft has spoken. Our opinion now means next to nothing because the ownership, the coaches, the general managers have spoken. There are more coaches and GMs that believe more about what that assistant coach says than about what anyone's opinion is about what Shedeur should have been.
Okay, well, we'll see in 2-3 years.
Right now, he has to fight for a roster spot. That's the first thing. He has to fight for a roster spot. He's currently the 5th one on the depth chart.
We'll see in 2 or 3 years whether who performed better, Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders. I have my prediction right now.
Well, they both have to play.
I believe it will be Shedeur Sanders.
And you're doing that based off what?
I'm doing it based on just my feel for what Shedeur Sanders can do out on the field, and his pedigree and where he came from, his own self-confidence, which I think is very important.
There's
for a quarterback.
Self-confidence and arrogance.
So I agree with that. And he's shown maybe too much in the arrogance part and brashness part. He's got to learn from that, and maybe hopefully he learned something from this, because it certainly. The main reason he fell in the draft was because of that, not because of his talent. You had him going number 3,
right? Because I believed in the reports that say that Shedeur Sanders and the Giants have, and I didn't know that he bombed the Giants interview. If I knew that, I wouldn't have him being drafted by the Giants. And originally, months ago, we were on the show. You can believe when I said it, that I thought Shedeur could fall to the Steelers at 21. You were like, "There's no ways he's leaving the top 3."
I didn't think there was. I thought he would go in the top 3 or 4.
But hold on, I want to make this abundantly clear before people rip on me for the arrogance versus confidence trait. Look at when Shedeur and Cam Ward both practice at the same time. There's a video going out there that's viral. Just watch it. There's one that says, "I want to be known as a quarterback. I want to play football. My hobby is football." And there's one that's saying, "You want to make a rap video? You don't do anything else after football." That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's why Cam Ward probably went number 1. Eats, sleeps, and breathes football. There's even questions about Trevor Lawrence before the draft because he said that football wasn't his number 1 love.
Well,
that thing affects...
Shaquille O'Neal is a rapper.
He's retired.
Yeah, I know, but he was a rapper.
There's a difference. Is Shedeur going to be the most dominant quarterback in the NFL?
Shedeur Sanders?
Is he going to be the most dominant quarterback in the NFL? Because Shaq was the most dominant center in NBA history.
I don't know. Nobody knows. I was listening to Colin Coward. He says, you know what? Nobody knows what's going to happen.
Of course nobody does.
True. And that's true. These drafts, where people fall in the draft, you pointed out. The people who were starred in the NFL, made it the Hall of Fame, didn't even get drafted.
Yeah.
Didn't even get drafted.
Warner never got drafted. Brady was a 6th-round pick.
He made the Hall of Fame. So... Tom Brady, 199, could be arguably the best player in NFL history. Brock Purdy, last player selected in the draft, waiting on what's going to be a very big contract for him. Been to the Super Bowl, had a big role in getting his team there. Played in 2 NFC Championship games. Went into a game with his elbow tendon torn, so he couldn't even throw the ball, and went out there and played.
I don't know if you call that played. He said hike.
Okay, well.
Because he couldn't throw the ball.
He was out on the field.
He said hike.
Yeah.
That's fair. Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching this clip of the Harvey Hour. If you want to watch the full show, you can by clicking the I in the top right-hand corner right now. If you want to take the show with you on the go, it is available wherever you get your podcast. We go live here on YouTube every single Tuesday and Friday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. So make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, and the notification bell to get notified whenever we upload a video and whenever we go live.